It's time to put your health in your own hands. Get ready to learn from today's top health and wellness innovators and thought leaders on Optimal Health Radio. Now, here's your host.
Hi, this is Tammy Patzer, and I'm really excited to introduce today's guest, Elizabeth Patrick. Elizabeth is widely known as a biofield energy practitioner, and she has been practicing various energetic healing modalities since 1997. Since 2010, she has been studying under the guidance of Mahendra Kumar Trivedi and the Trivedi effect. So today, welcome, Elizabeth. We're going to be talking all about the Trivedi effect. So how are you doing today?
Tammy, I'm doing just great. I'm so glad to be here and excited to share with you some of my knowledge about the Trivedi effect and Mr. Mahendra Trivedi.
Well, great. I'm really excited because this is a very interesting phenomenon. So let's just get right to it. What is the Trivedi effect?
Well, Tammy, the Trivedi effect is natural life force energy that comes directly from divine source. You might think of this energy as coming from the God of your understanding, or perhaps you can consider it energy that is creator sourced. This energy is fueling all of the creative intelligence on the planet, and it can be offered to and directed at and be harnessed by humans, animals, plants, and even non-living materials for their healing and transformation. This energy was gifted to Mahendra Trivedi in 1995, and since that time, Mr. Trivedi has been bringing this energy to a global audience. All walks of life and all ages have been shown to benefit from the Trivedi effect.
Wow, that's really phenomenal. So, Elizabeth, you've had a number of clients who have received the Trivedi effect through your remote healing program. Can you talk about the physical benefits your clients receive and the results they share with you through these healings?
Yes, Tammy, I'd be glad to. So the physical benefits of the Trivedi effect are numerous, but one of the most immediate effects that I see is that my clients report that their sleep is of much higher quality. They're not necessarily getting more sleep. It's maybe not so much about quantity, but the sleep that they do get is very high quality, and that they are able to wake up rejuvenated and refreshed and energized. Another physical benefit of the Trivedi effect is that there is greater stamina, life force, you might call it pizzazz, a zest for life. It's giving them a greater wattage so that they can be the most complete version of their most unlimited potential. And finally, clients report significant improvement in the momentum for their healing, recuperative powers from old dis-ease and imbalance, and transformation so that they are flowering into the most complete expression of who they're meant to be and flourishing in their lifetime.
Wow, that's really phenomenal. So that's the physical effects. What about emotional benefits related to the Trivedi effect?
Yes, the emotional benefits, Tammy, are tremendous through the Trivedi effect. I see them in almost every single client almost immediately. I hear my clients report less depression, so that seasonal depression or even overall depression dissolves. They have a greater optimism in their life, and a lot of their negative outlooks completely disappear. They stop worrying so much about the future. So that whole idea of being able to worry less is something that comes from being connected to the God of their understanding, because if they're connected and they're hearing the voice of the divine, why would they have to worry any longer? Also, the clients report that there is a release of old emotional trauma. In the past, we have been conditioned to just stuff our emotions or keep our emotions inside of ourselves. But through the Trivedi effect, one is able to learn how to fully express an emotion in a moment. I call this ability to express an emotion emotional accord. So it's not so much emotional balance that we're looking for. We're not trying to be balanced about our emotion. We're trying to be able to express our emotion fully and then move on to the next moment and express the exact emotion that we're experiencing in that moment and just move on and on. So if we're angry, we immediately express that emotion rather than trying to push it away for a while and maybe express it later. When we don't express our emotions, we become physically imbalanced, and that brings about mental and emotional and even physical kinds of dis-ease into our lives.
What are some of the most important benefits of the Trivedi effect as it relates to our mind and our intellect?
Well, Tammy, clients report a greater ability to focus and concentrate. They have less anxiety and less stress. They share that they have less mental restlessness and mind chatter. They have what I like to call brain gain, which is a term I use to call how the Trivedi effect helps us to use the greatest potential of our brain. Because you see, we're not really using our full potential. And as we receive the Trivedi effect energy, we're able to use that higher capacity in our brains and able to bring about a wider spectrum of mental applications into our lives.
I think I can really see that, because obviously if you have less stress and anxiety and you're not having that mental chatter and that fear of the future constantly happening, that you could have more use of your brain. Because I know when I get all stressed out, I can hardly dial a telephone, let alone think at a higher capacity. So tell me a little bit more about some of the benefits of the Trivedi effect related to relationships.
Yes, what I see in relationships with my clients is that there is a broadening of our understanding of what a relationship really is and what it means to be in relationship. Remember that we have a relationship with ourselves. We have a relationship with our divine. We have a relationship with friends and family. And we have that relationship with that sacred other. So when we are considering the relationships in our lives, we want to consider that whole spectrum. When we talk about the Trivedi effect and how that relates to being in relationship, clients report that they have greater feelings of acceptance by family members, by spouses, and they have a greater acceptance for themselves. They also express that they feel more honored in every area that applies to relationship. So that feeling of being honored is so important, and they feel honored in areas like being in social gatherings, being with their intimate other. In all areas, they sense that feeling of being honored. And as they honor in their relationships with others, they find that they're also more honoring with their relationship with themselves. And in intimate relationships, there is the general report that there's enhancement in the area of communication and the area of sexual expression.
Well, we all could use a lot more enhanced communication, that's for sure. So tell me more in terms of relationships. Not only do you have the relationships with self and others, but can the Trivedi effect help us with our careers or our vocations and professional life?
Absolutely, Tammy. I see an increased growth and flourishing of the professional area of all of my clients. They, even clients that didn't think that they actually had a professional aspect to themselves, learn that they have that. There's a greater self-worth. There's a greater sense that they have a worthiness, that they deserve, that there's a birthright, that they have a function, a soul destiny path on the planet, and they're able to begin to express that. The clients report a more condensed version of themselves emerging. This is especially true for clients that have been in a career path, but are then able to sort of condense that and let go of all the extraneous and distracting aspects of that and begin applying themselves in a more focused way, exactly the way they need to, so that they can express their unique blueprint. If a client has a business that's client-based, I see the expansion of the number of clients, and it almost happens like a flow, like a river flowing, and the amount of the river, of the water, starts to grow just as the client base starts to grow. There's increased prosperity and abundance. And I often hear my clients say something like that they feel like they're being supported by a bed of roses, or that they're on a cloud in terms of the feeling of support that they get. They're increasingly motivated and passionate about their path, and they feel divinely guided each step of the way. Even if they're challenged and have a great deal of stress, they embrace the challenge as a good thing and see the stress as healthy stress. They're learning from their challenges. So this idea of the stress, I think, is so important, because we have this stress that's not good for us, and then we have this stress that's really good for us. And this healthy stress has to do with when we're on the right path. We feel so passionate about something that we're doing. We feel so involved. We feel so on track. And that the lessons that we're learning through the stress that we're going through in order to accomplish all that we need to accomplish is a stress that we feel afterwards. We feel like, oh, I grew from that. Oh, I feel more fulfilled. Oh, I feel more like I can tackle things that I wasn't able to tackle before. Challenges can be hard, but ultimately, I think my clients see them as real lessons, and they never have a sense of being burnt out or completely drained by their stress and challenges.
That's really phenomenal, because I really do get that, because, in a stressful world, you're absolutely right. It's the stress that will damage you or literally kill you. And then there's other stress that keeps you moving forward, because you're moving forward and you're open to the challenges and all the new adventures that are coming your way. So, Elizabeth, in your opinion, what is the most or the greatest accomplishment of a human's life?
Well, Tammy, I think that sometimes we think in terms of accomplishments being like the amount of success that we have in our lives, or the amount of good health that we have in our lives, or perhaps that we were able to be in this wonderful relationship in our lives. And all of these are very important, but the umbrella answer to those smaller questions is that the big answer to the greatest accomplishment in a human's life is that they're connected with the divine, and that they're hearing the divine voice and able to take the steps that the divine is giving them and manifest them as accomplishments for all of our soul destiny path. So if we could see our lives as a tapestry, and that tapestry is woven with all of these beautiful threads, silk threads perhaps, threads of magenta and blue and silver and copper, all being woven together. And what is that accomplished by? That's accomplished by the divine giving us the steps that we need to take one by one to become that most complete expression of our God's grace. It's this idea of this accomplishment is that we want to be connected to that authority that has created universes and beyond. We're like flowers. The flower is not busy going to the library and looking up answers, or busy going to the psychiatrist, or busy going to get a massage. The flower is just connected with all that is and harnessing the energies that it needs. And this is all we have to do, is get connected with that natural life force energy, and we'll harness everything that we need to handle everything in our lives, to take advantage of windows of our opportunity, and to become the most unlimited version of our potential. And at the same excuse me.
Go ahead. I was just thinking how phenomenal that description is. Go ahead.
Yeah. At the same time, when we have this connection to divine source, it helps us to face the hurdles in our lives in a calm and peaceful way. So sometimes I know that we think that our greatest accomplishment might be that we want to express ourselves fully in a career. But so how do we go about expressing ourselves fully in a career? Well, we can go about it in a myriad of different ways, but if we go about it by being connected to the divine voice, then we can just take it step by step, and we will, in a very calm and peaceful and centered and on-track way, become that flowering of all that we're meant to be.
Wow, that's really beautiful. So how do you know if you're divinely connected?
It is such a great question, Tammy, and I'm asked this all the time. And I think there's some real good ways of tapping into that sense of whether we are connected or not. I think that the first thing that I look for in a client is this sense of being enhanced by their beauty and their character, so that there's this sense of integrity and standing straight and tall, and this sense of maybe shining eyes, and the soul and spirit being aligned with the mind and body. And when that character trait is there, the client is peaceful and calm. And I think that is one of the best ways for knowing yourself that you are connected. When you're peaceful and calm, you're connected. And I like to see that as probably the main trait for knowing that you're divinely connected. But also, and this goes hand in hand with the last item, you start trusting yourself and you develop more confidence. So there's this sense of, even though you question yourself and you may be pushed to the limits in terms of developing yourself, and you may be moving into uncomfortable ground, but at the end of the day, there's this sense of real confidence and trusting yourself and trusting in the process. Another way of knowing that you are connected to the divine, Tammy, is that you don't feel stuck. You're flowing on your path. So I know everyone that's listening has at one time or another felt like they're stuck on their path. And this is part of life. But if we're stuck And we're seeing the same scenery over and over again in our lives for 2 or 3 years at a time. You are stuck and you're not being divinely guided. When you're divinely guided, you flow on your path. There's this sense of flow. There are times when you're seeing very new environments passing by, and then there's sometimes when you're repeating and seeing the same things, but you're seeing the same things perhaps in new light. So there's that sense of flow on your path. I know Ken Wilber says that a great spiritual path is one that's like a conveyor belt. And I love that analogy for ourselves when we're knowing that we're divinely connected. It's that we're flowing, that we're moving along. And then a sign that you're divinely connected, one of my favorites, is that even though you find your life challenging, you feel love and passion for what you're doing. So I have clients that call me and say, I'm afraid that if I start following the divine guidance, I may not be able to keep up, or I'll get burnt out, or I'm also doing another job where I know I have to do it for a living, but I don't know how I'm possibly going to have the energy to continue to also follow my divine guidance. And you know what I've learned from following divine guidance is that you will always have enough energy because you're passionate about it, because you're aligned with it. And if you can put the energy into those areas of your life where you are divinely guided, you'll find that they will bloom into a fruition that's way beyond your imagination. And finally, Tammy, really another really important one about how to know that you're divinely guided. This is a very important piece, and that is that you are getting results. So I ask my clients to look back 6 months from the time that we're talking and say, does your life seem happier to you, more expanded? Do you have more inner peace? And are you more fulfilled? And if you say, yes, I am, then you are connected with the divine. If you say, no, I'm not, then whatever you've been doing for that last 6 months you're not on track around that.
Wow, I love that because you gave such a clear way to know that you're divinely connected. So on the opposite side of that coin, what are some of the signs that you are not divinely connected?
Yes, excellent question, Tammy. And it's basically the opposite of how you know when you are divinely connected, but I'll briefly go over several of those themes. The first way of knowing that you're not divinely connected is you have trouble making decisions. And there's kind of two pieces to that, because one piece is that you just can't make a decision, and the other piece about making decisions is that when you're moving into new states of consciousness, making decisions, the decisions process isn't as comfortable as it was before because you're in new territory. And so what 2 years ago was an easy decision for you may not be a similar decision in this moment, may be much more difficult for you because it's a more expanded aspect of what you're doing. I find myself in this position a lot lately where I'm walking my path and the path is unfamiliar, and it's kind of like I've been walking along the path and the woods have been very nice and I've been very clear as to which way to go. And then there's sometimes when your path becomes like the top of a mountain where it's strewn with boulders and you really have trouble finding your way through it. As you come into new territory in your consciousness, there can be this challenge of having more challenges making those decisions. And the answer to all of that is to just keep working on your spiritual connection, because if you work on your spiritual connection, you will eventually get guidance around that ability to make a decision. So inability to make decisions shows that you're not divinely connected, but you do want to take your time making those decisions. Sometimes it just takes a while while you get adjusted to the new terrain. Also, another sign that you're not divinely guided, Tammy, is that you're struggling with emotional trauma and many health disorders. It is well known now that if we have emotional trauma and if we have health disorders, we're not aligned with our divine. We're not on track. We're not receptive to and really absorbing up that natural life force energy that is part of that Trivedi effect. Because as you do, all of those emotional traumas will begin to dissolve. Your health disorders will dissolve. I'll often have a client, let's say, that has a back issue, and they will want some specific recommendation for that back issue. But a lot of the time, I will see that the client actually just needs to get more on track with their life, and there's complete expression of their soul destiny path, and that back issue will disappear because they're just needing, their back is just showing them that they're misaligned on a physical level. And when they get on mental, emotional, spiritual alignment, that back will just go back right into alignment. Also, Tammy, when you're not divinely guided, you resist. You find that you're resisting the natural flow of nature and that you're not learning from nature. And this almost always comes about by repetitious life, that you have the repetitions of the challenges in your life that keeping you from really coming into your most unlimited into your most complete expression. And then, Tammy, also, you have anxiety and fear of the future. So when you have anxiety, there is that anxiety of being in new terrain, but you will quickly overcome that. And then that fear of the future, that's going to disappear because you are getting a step-by-step, almost like a MapQuest, to know each of the steps in your full expression of what you're supposed to do, one step at a time. And Tammy, if you miss one of those steps, then you can become lost, just as in the GPS in a car. If you're listening to the steps that you need to take to get from point A to point B, and you miss one of the steps, then you can easily get lost. So that there's this fear of the future that manifests because you haven't been able to be connected to hear those steps.
That's really, I like the idea of having that MapQuest. But like you're right, yeah, like for example, I was kind of chuckling to myself because I was thinking about sometimes I get confused on my right and my left. So for example, if you turn right and you were supposed to turn left, you're absolutely right. You would get lost. And if you're not connected, I mean, I can really look back at my life and see times when I was disconnected because I did have inability to make decisions. Decisions were hard. Maybe I had health trouble. Maybe I was like fighting against something. And then of course, when you are connected, you're absolutely right. There is a calmness. You feel protected. You don't have that fear of the future because you know that whatever's happening is happening for your highest and best.
I feel like when we're talking about this whole concept, that this whole idea of what is the MapQuest really, it's really, if we're down on the road of life in our little car, right, we actually don't even know what's around the next corner. We may know, if we may be in our neighborhood, we're leaving the house for the day, but we really don't know what's even around the next bend. There could be a car accident, there could be a tree down. We don't know that, but when we call up to that divine perspective, that traffic helicopter, if we might put it that way, then this divine perspective has a way of looking down and knowing what our next step should be. And the more that we can tune into that sense of that divine perception that's so broad and gives us so much more in terms of information and knowledge and wisdom to base our decisions on, why would we not call up to that traffic helicopter every single day to know what's next? So I love this analogy of the GPS and the car, and that if we're going to go from point A to point B, the best way to do that is to call up to that divine guidance and have them give us the route that we're meant to take, and pay attention to each of those steps. And if we don't pay attention to those steps, or we miss a step, then we may get some obstacles in our way. But then we get ourselves back on track by continuing to listen to the steps that we need to take. I just love it.
Yes, I agree. And I think it's so easy for people to relate to also. So I wanted to ask you a couple more questions related to the Trivedia effect. I know that many people meditate, and I know that you come from a long background of yoga and meditation, yet you gravitated to the energy of the Trivedia effect. So if I meditate every day, do I still need this energy?
Yeah, this is such a great question, and it is a fascinating one to me. I probably meditated every single day for 35 years. So I feel like I'm an expert in this area, and I can save you a lot of time because I will not recommend meditation anymore. I think meditation has its place. I think meditation is a very good way to quiet the mental chatter. But I think that the Trivedia effect is a much, much more efficient way. When we meditate, we are attempting to bring our mind into a state of thoughtlessness. And that's kind of like attempting to get our heart to stop beating, or attempting to get our lungs to stop breathing. We can do this for a very short time, but the mind is designed to be thinking. The mind is designed to have thoughts. And we really realize that the reason that we were trained to meditate, or the reason that we were seeking meditation, it boiled down to, the essence of it was that we wanted to get a glimpse of the divine. We wanted to hear that divine voice. We wanted to quiet that mental chatter so thoroughly that we would get that divine voice. But instead, we really had to do a lot of work about all revolving around having no thoughts. And instead, with the Trivedia effect, you are just connecting yourself to divine source without any of the brain games that we were doing when we were meditating. When you are experiencing the Trivedia effect, you immediately will fall into a state of calmness. Your anxiety will decrease, and you will hear that divine source. You will hear that divine voice. You will have a sense of being and being guided. This whole idea of just being and beingness with no effort around meditating for 20 minutes every day, or meditating for an hour every day, or doing 225,000 mantras to get your mind quiet. All of this, I think we're going to look back and say, we really didn't need to do that. We can accomplish this same thing so much more effectively with the Trivedia effect.
Wow, that is phenomenal, because every time I try to just meditate and, like you said, empty my mind, all kinds of thoughts come in that are like, where did that come from? Because it's like the mind wants to just keep thinking about something, and it is very difficult. So what do you think is probably the greatest fear of every human?
Well, Tammy, I think that it kind of goes back to this whole sense of why do we meditate? And I guess I want to make sure that I I share with the audience that if you do meditate, or if you are thinking of meditating, or if you've meditated for a long time, that you haven't wasted your time, that you've created the frequency or the resonance of your strong desire to hear the divine voice. And I recommend that you don't instantly stop meditating, but that you continue to move forward and bloom and flourish and find every other new way to accomplish this ability to hear the divine voice over all the other voices of like family and ego and social interaction and all the other old conditioning and patterns that we no longer need, when we learn that we can just get that direct connection to the divine. And so moving now into your question, which is what is the greatest underlying fear for a human being? It's that we won't be able to hear that divine voice, that we won't be able to find the most complete expression of this sense of being connected to the divine in every moment. It's that we won't be able to find the God of our understanding. So we can look and think that we have this great fear of maybe not being a success, or maybe being in poor health, or maybe not finding the right relationship. But what we really, really fear underneath all of that is that we don't get that connection, because as you know from everything we've just talked about, the most important thing is getting that divine voice and hearing that and acting on it. And when we are asked to act on it, it's so important that we go step by step.
I think I understand. It's really interesting that you said that it is the fear of not being able to find the God of our understanding. And I think a lot of people do have that fear because they have all of the mind chatter and everything. What about if I think I hear or know that I'm getting divine guidance, but maybe I don't follow through or take action? Can the Trivedi effect help me with that?
Right, Tammy. I was segueing into that with that idea of following the guidance step by step. So it's so interesting, because I have a lot of clients that actually have begun to hear the divine voice. And the next challenge that happens for them is, for some reason, they don't follow through. I think it's partially a fear. It's a fear of becoming the most unlimited potential of whoever you're meant to be. For some reason, they perhaps can't take that first step, or maybe they feel that that first step is so mundane. I remember the exact moment I heard my divine give me direction. And that was actually, I was teaching a yoga class. I had been teaching for about 2 years, and I always had my yoga classes all perfectly organized. And I had a sequence, I had perhaps a meditation, I had a visualization, I had a relaxation at the end, I maybe even had a meditation for them to do at the end. And one day I was teaching in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I heard my divine voice say, hello there, but we're not going to do your class tonight. We're going to do the class that we'd like you to do. And it was like, wow, I was really flabbergasted is a word that comes to mind, but also I was like intrigued, and I'm like, okay, sure, I'll do whatever my divine guidance tells me to do. So they taught the class basically, and I just translated it and downloaded the information and gave it to my students. And afterwards, although my students loved my class, they thought that was the best class I'd ever taught. And they said, how did you know to say the things that you said? And how did you know to sequence those poses in the way that you sequenced them? And I was just thinking to myself, my goodness, that was just the divine talking through me. And of course, because of all the compliments, I was like, well, I'm certainly not going to teach my own class anymore. I'll wait for the divine guidance class. But being the kind of overachiever and over workaholic that I am, I always would plan my yoga class from then on. But that invariably, that divine voice would step in and take over and teach the class. And it was so interesting. So that was the first time that I followed divine guidance. And then in other areas of my life, it started to kind of come in. And of course, if you have success in one area, then why not in another? So one morning I heard my divine guidance tell me to wear purple. And then it was just so hilarious because a whole lot of other friends wore purple that day. And it was just fun to sort of share about that. And it raised the vibrations of all of us. And then another time I remember that I was supposed to read a book that the divine said, read this book. I was at the bookstore and the divine said, read this book. And I ignored the divine voice that day. And how that was terrible of me, but I did. But then 2 days later, my sister called me and said, have you read this book? And it was the book that I had ignored at the bookstore. So of course I went and got the book and read it. But the idea here is that think for a moment of the God of your understanding as your boss or your CEO. And if you asked by your CEO to do something, to take some step to fulfill some directive, or you can choose to do that or you can choose not to. And if you decide not to do it, then is your CEO going to have a lot of faith in you for the next time that he or she asks you to do something for you? And if you do follow the directive, then of course your CEO is going to grow in confidence that you can be of some assistance. So I think it's really important to follow each step that the divine gives you, even if it seems scary or you're in fear of it, or if it doesn't make sense, just follow it. Because as you continue to follow each directive, you're going to create an interface with your divine guidance where there's trust and communication, and that communication will be just like instant for you and not be something where you're having to call it up and redial and get a busy signal and all that kind of thing. It's going to be a direct connection, Tammy.
Wow, I've learned so much about how to be connected today from you, Elizabeth. And I really do like that analogy of if the God of your understanding is your boss and you do a good job, of course they take care of you. And hopefully God would never, the divine wouldn't fire us, but it would be a little more understanding. But I understand that if you actually follow divine guidance, of course, you're going to get more and more good information that you'll recognize. And I think that's part of it too, is recognizing when you are receiving this divine guidance. And sometimes that takes a little practice because we have to, start to pay attention to it and understand what it is. So if people want to contact you to work with you some more or to learn more, how can they do that?
Yeah, Tammy, thank you so much. So I have two websites. One is elizabethpatric.com, and it's Elizabeth with a Z as in zebra, and Patrick without a K. So Patric, elizabethpatric.com. And then I also have my Flower Essence website, which is Spirit Water Gardens. Gardens is plural.com. So spiritwatergardens.com. I'm easy to find.
Great. Well, that's really awesome. And next time, I'd like to dig into some of the information about the flower essences too, because that's a very interesting and unique thing that you do with the flowers. And I understand that you travel around the world as well as pick a lot of wildflowers in Wisconsin where you're located. So that just sounds really phenomenal.
I would be delighted to tell you about that next time, Tammy.
Great.
I look forward to it.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. This is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
You've been listening to today's top health and wellness innovators and thought leaders on Optimal Health Radio. To get more solid health and wellness information, visit optimalhealthradio.com.